The morning started like any other Tuesday in New York City. People rushed to work, coffee shops buzzed with activity, and the traffic moved in its usual slow crawl through the streets. Nobody expected aliens to show up at exactly 9:47 a.m. Eastern Time. Every radar system on Earth went crazy. A massive object had appeared in orbit without any warning. It was huge, bigger than any aircraft carrier, and it looked like it was made of crystal and metal twisted together in impossible ways. President Helen Martinez was having breakfast in the White House when her phone rang. It was General Paul Roberts, and he sounded worried. "Ma'am, we have a situation. Something big just showed up in orbit. It's not one of ours." 20 minutes later, the president sat in the Situation Room with her top advisors. On the main screen, satellite images showed the alien ship hanging in space like a dark cloud. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, with surfaces that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "How big is it?" President Martinez asked. "About 3 miles long, ma'am," replied Admiral Susan Blake. "And it's not alone. Our deep space sensors are picking up more objects at the edge of the solar system. A lot more." Secretary of Defense Jake Morrison leaned forward. "Have they tried to communicate?" "Not yet, sir. But they're scanning us. Every military base, every major city, every satellite we have. They're being very thorough." Dr. Lisa Parker, the chief science advisor, looked up from her tablet. "Mr. President, based on the energy readings, this ship uses technology we can't even begin to understand. If they wanted to attack us, we would already be dead." The president nodded grimly. "So what do they want?" Her question was answered 3 hours later when the alien ship sent a message to the United Nations building in New York. The message was simple. They wanted to meet. The meeting was set for the next day. World leaders flew in from every continent, and the UN building was surrounded by more security than had ever been seen in one place. But everyone knew that if the aliens wanted to cause trouble, human security would not stop them. President Martinez stood at the window of the UN conference room, looking up at the alien ship. It was visible even in daylight, a dark spot against the blue sky that reminded everyone that Earth was no longer alone in the universe. "Are you ready for this?" asked Jake Morrison. "Is anyone ready to meet aliens?" the president replied. "But we don't have a choice." At exactly 2 p.m., the air in the center of the conference room began to shimmer. A bright light appeared, and suddenly 5 figures stood where empty space had been moments before. They were tall, maybe 8 feet, with reptilian skin that looked like it was made of green and gold scales. Each had 4 arms that ended in hands, with too many fingers, and their eyes were large and dark, like pools of black water. The one in front stepped forward and spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "I am Ambassador Zethkara of the Galactic Council. We come to deliver a message to the humans of this world." The translator device on his chest turned his words into perfect English, but there was something cold about the way it spoke. President Martinez stood up from her seat at the head of the human delegation. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador." "I'm President Martinez. We're honored by your visit." Zethkara's large eyes fixed on her. "Honor is not required, only compliance." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every human delegate felt their blood run cold, but President Martinez kept her voice steady. "What kind of compliance?" "Your species has reached what we call the threshold of interstellar awareness. You have primitive space travel, nuclear weapons, and global communications. This makes you eligible for inclusion in the Galactic Council's protection." "Protection?" asked Dr. Parker. "Protection that comes with responsibilities," Zethkara replied. "The Council maintains peace across 4,000 star systems. This peace requires tribute from all member species." The alien began to pace, his 4 arms moving in complex gestures as he spoke. "The human tribute will be as follows: 30% of your planetary resources delivered annually. This includes metals, energy sources, and biological materials." Murmurs of shock rippled through the human delegation. President Martinez felt her heart racing, but she kept her expression calm. "What else?" she asked. 50,000 of your young. between the ages of 16 and 25 will be selected for labor conscription. They will serve the Council for a period of 20 years before being returned to Earth. "You're talking about slavery," said Jake Morrison, his voice hard with anger. "We prefer the term voluntary service," Seth Kara replied without emotion. "Finally, all human technological development will be subject to Council oversight. We will determine what knowledge your species may possess." The room fell silent. Every human delegate understood what they were hearing. This was not a negotiation or a treaty. This was a surrender demand. "What happens if we refuse?" President Martinez asked. For the first time, Zethkara's expression changed. His mouth opened slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth in what might have been a smile. "Refusal is not an option that civilized species consider. The Council has brought peace to over 4,000 worlds. Your primitive weapons and barely functional space program pose no threat to our authority." The alien gestured toward the window, where his ship hung in the sky like a sword over the Earth. "We have studied your species for many years. We know about your nuclear weapons, your armies, your navies. We know about every satellite you have launched and every weapon you have built. None of it matters." He moved closer to the human delegation, his large frame casting a shadow over them. "Your most powerful explosive devices would barely scratch the hull of our smallest ship. Your fastest aircraft move like insects compared to our vessels. Your armies fight with projectile weapons that would be considered antiques by any council." "Species," Dr. Parker spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "How long have you been watching us?" "Long enough to understand your capabilities and your limitations. We observed your world wars, your Cold War, your space race. We watched you split the atom and reach your moon. All of it was ... primitive." General Roberts, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. "You sound like you've done this before." 4,000 times, Seth Kara replied. "Some species surrender immediately when they understand the situation. Others attempt resistance. The result is always the same. And if a species chooses to fight?" President Martinez asked. "Then they learn why the Council has maintained peace for 10,000 years. Would you like to see what happened to the last species that chose violence over cooperation?" The alien touched a device on his arm, and a holographic image appeared above the conference table. It showed a planet that looked like Earth, with blue oceans and green continents. Then the image changed, showing the same planet covered in glass and ash with no signs of life anywhere. The Kethmori were a proud warrior species. They had weapons similar to yours, perhaps slightly more advanced. They chose to fight. The image faded away. Their planet is now a monument to the futility of opposing the Council. The human delegates sat in stunned silence. President Martinez felt the weight of 6 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. 7 of your solar rotations. The tribute collectors will arrive then. We suggest you use this time to prepare your people for the transition to Council oversight." Zethkara moved toward the center of the room, where the light was beginning to shimmer again. "Do not make the mistake of thinking this is a negotiation. The terms are final. The Council's decision is absolute. You will comply, or you will face the consequences." The aliens vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving only the faint smell of ozone and the echo of their words. President Martinez looked around the room at faces filled with shock, anger, and fear. Outside, the alien ship continued to hang in the sky, a constant reminder of the choice that lay before humanity. 7 days, she said quietly. "We have 7 days to decide the future of our species." But as she spoke those words, President Martinez felt something stirring inside her. It was not fear or despair. It was something much more dangerous to alien conquerors. It was the beginning of human stubbornness. The elevator descended 500 feet below the Pentagon, carrying President Martinez and her closest advisors to the most secure room in America. The underground bunker had been built during the Cold War, but it had never hosted a meeting. Quite like this one, General Paul Roberts led the way down a long corridor lined with blast doors. His footsteps echoed in the silence, and everyone could feel the weight of rock and concrete above their heads. This was where America's most secret military plans were made, and today it would decide the fate of the entire human race. How many people know about this place? President Martinez asked. Less than 50, ma'am, Roberts replied. And everyone here today has been cleared for our highest security level. The conference room was simple and cold, with metal walls and no windows. A large table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs for the dozen people who would help make the most important decision in human history. Admiral Susan Blake was already there, spreading tactical displays across the table. Next to her sat Colonel Rick Stone, who ran the military's deepest intelligence programs. Dr. Kevin Hayes stood at the far end of the room, his face pale but determined. Before we begin, President Martinez said, taking her seat, I want everyone to understand something. Nothing we discuss here leaves this room. The survival of our species may depend on absolute secrecy. She looked around the table at the faces of America's top military and scientific minds. Now, Dr. Hayes, you said you had something important to tell us. Dr. Hayes activated a holographic display that showed images from around the world. The aliens have made one critical error in their assessment of humanity. They've been watching us for years, studying our militaries, our governments, our official responses to crisis. But they don't understand what makes humans truly dangerous. Which is? Asked Jake Morrison. We're not predictable, Hayes replied. Every other species the Council has conquered followed the same pattern. When faced with superior technology, they either surrendered immediately or fought conventional battles using their best weapons and their strongest armies. They fought the way the Council expected them to fight. He changed the display to show historical footage from World War II. But look at this. When the Nazis occupied Europe, the official armies were defeated quickly. But the real war was fought by ordinary people who refused to give up. Farmers became saboteurs. Teachers became spies. Children became messengers for the resistance. Colonel Stone nodded grimly. The aliens expect us to respond with the U.S. military, the Chinese army, the Russian nuclear arsenal. They've calculated how to defeat our conventional forces. But that's not how humans actually fight when we're desperate, Admiral Blake added. We don't just have armies. We have 300 million Americans who own firearms and billions more people around the world who won't go quietly. Dr. Hayes pulled up another display, this one showing detailed scans of the alien ship. I've been analyzing their technology since yesterday. It's incredibly advanced, but it's also perfectly logical. Every system is designed for maximum efficiency. Every weapon is built for optimal performance. There's no waste, no redundancy, no chaos. That sounds like a good thing, President Martinez said. For them, yes. But it also means their technology is predictable. They build for perfection, not for adaptation. They expect their enemies to be logical too. Commander Lisa Edwards, who ran NASA's military programs, leaned forward. What are you suggesting, Kevin? I'm suggesting we don't fight them the way they expect us to fight. We don't use our best weapons or our strongest defenses. We don't respond with perfect military precision. He changed the display again, this time showing intelligence reports from around the world. The aliens have been monitoring our official military responses. They know about our nuclear weapons, our aircraft carriers, our missile defense systems. They've calculated exactly how to defeat all of it. So what do we do? Asked General Roberts. We respond with something they've never seen before, Dr. Hayes said. We respond with 6 billion humans who are angry, creative, and completely unpredictable. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this idea. President Martinez stood up and walked to the display, studying the images of the alien ship. They're talking about total war, she said quietly. Not just military against military, but every person on Earth against them. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Hayes replied. The aliens want to fight the United States military or the Chinese army. They're not prepared to fight humanity itself. Jake Morrison looked skeptical. Kevin, these are ordinary people. Farmers, teachers, factory workers. How can they fight against technology we can't even understand? Because they don't think like soldiers, Hayes answered. A soldier follows orders and uses standard tactics. But a farmer might think of something completely different. A teacher might see a solution that no military mind would consider. A factory worker might know how to build something that our best engineers never imagined. Dr. Lisa Parker, who had been quiet until now, suddenly sat up straight. That's it. That's actually it. What? President Martinez asked. The aliens are bureaucrats, Parker said, her voice growing excited. They've conquered 4,000 species. Using the same method every time. They show up, make their demands, and either accept surrender or crush military resistance. It's a process they've perfected over thousands of years. She stood up and began pacing. But what if we don't follow their process? What if we don't respond the way they expect any species to respond? Colonel Stone was beginning to understand. You're talking about asymmetric warfare taken to the extreme. Not just guerrilla tactics, but something completely outside their experience. Exactly, Hayes said. The aliens have studied human military doctrine, but they haven't studied human nature. They don't understand what happens when you threaten our children, our homes, our freedom. Admiral Blake pulled up casualty reports from recent conflicts. Every time we've faced a superior enemy, Americans have found ways to fight back that surprised everyone. We're not just talking about our military, we're talking about our entire culture. The aliens see our weapons and our armies, General Roberts added. But they don't see our inventors, our mechanics, our programmers, our engineers. They don't see millions of people who know how to build things, fix things, and create things. President Martinez returned to her seat, her mind racing. So you're suggesting we tell everyone? The entire world, everything? Yes, ma'am, Hayes replied. We tell them about the aliens, about the demands, about the threat, and then we let 6 billion humans decide how they want to respond. That's incredibly dangerous, Morrison warned. Mass panic, economic collapse, social breakdown? Maybe, Hayes acknowledged, or maybe something else. Maybe we'll discover what humans are really capable of when they're fighting for their survival. The president looked around the table at her advisors. What would this look like? How would we even coordinate something like this? Commander Edwards smiled for the first time since the meeting began. We don't coordinate it. That's the point. We give people the information they need and let them figure out their own solutions. Every garage becomes a weapons lab, Colonel Stone said. Every factory becomes a defense contractor. Every school becomes a training center. Every person becomes a soldier in their own way, Admiral Blake added. Not following orders, but fighting however they think best. Dr. Hayes activated a new display showing communication networks around the world. The aliens can monitor our military communications, but they can't monitor 6 billion individual conversations. They can analyze our official strategies, but they can't predict what millions of creative people will come up with. It's never been tried before, General Roberts said. No government has ever asked its entire population to become an army. That's because no government has ever faced extinction, President Martinez replied. The aliens are giving us 7 days. If we're going to do this, we need to start now. She stood up and looked at each person around the table. I want to be absolutely clear about what we're discussing. We're talking about revealing classified information to the entire world. We're talking about asking ordinary people to fight against technology that could destroy planets. Yes, ma'am, Hayes said simply. And you believe this could work? I believe it's our only chance, he replied. The aliens expect us to respond with fear and desperation. They expect us to use our most powerful weapons in a hopeless last stand. They expect us to fight like every other species they've conquered. But humans don't fight like other species, Admiral Blake said. We fight dirty. We fight smart. We fight with everything we have. And what we have, Dr. Parker added, is not just weapons and armies. What we have is human creativity, human stubbornness, and human refusal to give up. President Martinez made her decision. We'll do it. We'll tell everyone everything and let them decide how to respond, but we need to be ready for whatever happens next. What about the aliens? Morrison asked. They'll be watching. Let them watch, the president replied. They want to see how humans respond to their ultimatum. They're about to find out. As the meeting ended and the advisors began to file out, President Martinez remained in her chair, staring at the display showing the alien ship. In 6 days, the television studios in Washington, D.C. had never been so quiet. Technicians moved carefully around their equipment, checking cameras and microphones with unusual attention to detail. Everyone knew that what happened in the next hour would change the world forever. President Martinez stood in front of the mirror in her dressing room, adjusting her jacket for the 3rd time. Her press secretary, Nancy Williams, watched nervously from the doorway. "Are you sure about this, ma'am?" Nancy asked. "Once you say these words, there's no taking them back." "I'm sure," the president replied, though her hands were shaking slightly. "The American people deserve to know the truth. The whole world deserves to know." At exactly 8 p.m. Eastern Time, every major television network, radio station, and internet platform on Earth began broadcasting the same signal. In living rooms from New York to Tokyo, families gathered around their screens. In bars and restaurants, conversations stopped as people turned to watch. In hospitals and schools, work paused as everyone focused on the same thing. President Martinez appeared on screen, but she was not in the Oval Office. Instead, she stood in a factory in Detroit, surrounded by workers in hard hats and safety glasses. Behind her, the machinery was silent, and every worker was looking directly at the camera. "My fellow Americans and citizens of the world," she began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to say. 3 days ago, representatives of something called the Galactic Council arrived at Earth. They came with a message for humanity. In a small apartment in Chicago, construction worker Danny Murphy set down his beer and leaned forward. His wife, Marie, grabbed his hand as they listened. "The message was simple," the president continued. "They want us to surrender. They want 30% of everything we produce. They want 50,000 of our young people to serve as slaves. They want to control every aspect of our future." In London, teacher Emma Johnson pulled her children closer as they watched on their tablet. In Tokyo, engineer Hiroshi Tanaka paused his late-night work to focus on the translation. "I want to be completely honest with you," President Martinez said. "Their technology is far beyond ours. Their weapons are more powerful than anything we have. By every conventional measure, we cannot win a war against them." The camera pulled back to show more of the factory floor. Dozens of workers stood listening, their faces showing a mixture of fear and determination. "But we are not going to surrender," the president declared, her voice growing stronger. "We are not going to let them take our children. We are not going to let them steal our future. Because they have made one critical mistake." She walked among the workers, placing her hand on the shoulder of an older man with grease-stained coveralls. "They think they understand us. They've watched our armies, studied our weapons, analyzed our governments, but they don't understand what makes us human." In Kansas, mechanic Bob Williams watched from his garage where he had been working on an old car engine. His neighbor, Gary Thompson, had come over to watch, and both men found themselves nodding as the president spoke. "They expect us to respond like every other species they've conquered. They expect us to use our best weapons in a hopeless last stand. They expect us to fight like soldiers following orders." The president stopped walking and looked directly into the camera. "But we're not just soldiers. We're farmers and teachers, and mechanics and nurses. We're inventors and artists and programmers and builders. We're 6 billion people who know how to create, how to adapt, and how to solve problems." In Seoul, biochemist Dr. Rachel Kim was watching with her research team. As the president spoke, she saw something change in their eyes. Fear was being replaced by something else. "The aliens have given us 7 days," President Martinez continued. 7 days to decide whether we surrender or fight. I'm here to tell you that we're going to fight, but we're not going to fight the way they expect." She gestured to the workers around her. "We're going to fight as Americans. As humans. We're going to use every skill, every talent, every crazy idea that 6 billion people can come up with. The camera moved to show individual workers, each one representing millions of people watching around the world. If you're a mechanic, we need you to think about machines. If you're a teacher, we need you to think about learning. If you're a farmer, we need you to think about growing things. If you're a student, we need you to think about possibilities. In Phoenix, retired NASA engineer Carol Davis felt her heart racing. For the first time in years, she felt like her knowledge might be needed for something important. "The aliens think they know everything about us," the president said. "They think they've calculated our every move, but they don't know what happens when Americans get creative. They don't know what happens when humans refuse to give up." She walked to a workbench where tools were laid out in neat rows. Starting right now, every garage is a laboratory. Every factory is a defense contractor. Every school is a training center. Every person who wants to help is part of the resistance. In Miami, teenager Alex Rodriguez looked up from his computer where he had been working on a robotics project. His mind was already racing with ideas. "We're not asking you to be soldiers," President Martinez continued. "We're asking you to be yourselves. To use whatever skills you have, whatever knowledge you possess, whatever crazy ideas you've always wanted to try." The camera showed workers picking up tools, their movements purposeful and determined. "The aliens will be watching our military bases, our government buildings, our official responses, but they won't be watching your garage, your basement, your workshop. They won't be monitoring your conversations with your neighbors, your brainstorming sessions with your friends." In Seattle, programmer Jennifer Walsh was already opening her laptop, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she began to code. "We're going to share everything," the president announced. "Every piece of scientific knowledge, every military technique, every technological breakthrough. The government's secrets are now your secrets. The military's resources are now your resources." She held up a small device that looked like a modified cell phone. "This is a communication device that can't be monitored by alien technology. Instructions for building it are being uploaded to the internet right now. Build them, share them, use them to coordinate with each other." In factories and workshops around the world, people were already reaching for their phones, downloading the instructions, making plans. "The aliens expect us to panic," President Martinez said. "They expect chaos and confusion. Instead, they're going to see 6 billion humans working together in ways they never imagined." She walked back to the center of the factory floor. "They want to fight the United States military. They want to fight the Chinese army. They want to fight governments and official forces. But they're not prepared to fight humanity itself." The workers around her began to move, not in formation like soldiers, but in the natural, purposeful way that people move when they have important work to do. "We have advantages they don't understand," the president continued. "We're not predictable. We don't follow standard procedures. We don't think the way they expect us to think." She smiled for the first time during the broadcast. "We're stubborn. We're creative. We're completely insane when someone threatens our families. And we're about to show the Galactic Council what happens when you pick a fight with the human race." The camera pulled back to show the entire factory floor, filled with workers who were no longer just workers. They were now part of something bigger. "The aliens have 7 days to change their minds and leave peacefully," President Martinez said. "If they don't, they'll discover that conquering humanity is not like conquering any other species." She looked directly into the camera one. "Final time. We are not slaves. We are not subjects. We are not victims. We are humans, and we will not surrender." The broadcast ended with a simple message displayed on screens around the world. Instructions available at humanityfightsback.org. Within minutes, the website was receiving millions of visitors. People were downloading plans, sharing ideas, and organizing in ways that had never been seen before. The aliens had expected to face the armies of Earth. Instead, they were about to face something far more dangerous: the collective creativity of the human race. The garage in Kansas had never been so busy. Bob Williams wiped sweat from his forehead as he looked at the strange device taking shape on his workbench. It looked like a cross between a microwave oven and a satellite dish, built from car parts. "And old electronics, you sure this thing will work?" asked his neighbor Gary Thompson, who was helping him weld the metal frame. "No idea," Bob replied honestly. "But that's kind of the point, isn't it? The aliens can't predict what they don't understand." 3 days had passed since the president's broadcast, and the world had changed in ways nobody could have imagined. The Humanity Fights Back website had crashed twice from too many visitors, but mirror sites appeared faster than they could be taken down. Plans and ideas flowed freely across the internet, shared by millions of people who had never met, but were now working toward the same goal. In Chicago, Danny Murphy and his construction crew had taken over an abandoned warehouse. They were not building houses anymore. Instead, they were assembling something that looked like a giant crossbow made from I-beams and hydraulic pistons. The plans say it should launch a projectile at 3 times the speed of sound, Danny explained to his wife Marie, who was helping with the electrical systems. "Don't ask me how. The guy who designed it used to work for NASA." Marie connected another wire and shook her head. "A week ago you were complaining about fixing potholes. Now you're building space weapons." "A week ago, aliens hadn't shown up demanding our kids," Danny replied grimly. The transformation was happening everywhere. In Phoenix, Carol Davis had turned her backyard into a testing ground for electromagnetic pulse devices. Her neighbors, instead of complaining about the noise, had started bringing her coffee and asking how they could help. "The theory is simple," she explained to a group of retired engineers who had volunteered to assist. "We overload their sensors with electromagnetic interference. They won't be able to see what's coming." "And what exactly is coming?" asked Dr. Harold Green, a former physics professor. Carol smiled. "Everything we can think of." In Miami, Alex Rodriguez had not slept in 2 days. His robotics club had grown from 5 teenagers to over 200 people of all ages, all working on small flying devices that could carry cameras and other equipment. "The first wave is just for surveillance," Alex explained to his team. "We need to understand their technology before we can fight it." His friend Maria Santos looked up from the drone she was programming. "My grandmother thinks we're all crazy." "My grandmother lived through World War II," Alex replied. "She told me that when people try to make you a slave, crazy is exactly what you need to be." The aliens, watching from their ship in orbit, were growing confused. Their sensors detected increased activity across the planet, but it did not match any known pattern of military preparation. Instead of armies gathering in central locations, they saw millions of small groups working on projects that made no sense. Ambassador Zethkara stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the reports from his surveillance teams. "What are they building?" he asked his tactical officer, Vicstar. "Unknown, sir." The devices appear to be improvised constructions using primitive materials. Many of them seem to serve no military purpose. "Are they preparing to surrender?" "Negative, sir. Communication intercepts suggest the opposite. They appear to be organizing some form of resistance." Zethkara's 4 arms moved in a gesture of dismissal. "Impossible. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours. What could they possibly build that would threaten us?" But even as he said it, something about the human activity troubled him. In 4,000 conquests, no species had ever responded. This way, in London, Emma Johnson had transformed her classroom into a coordination center. Students, parents, and neighbors worked together on different projects, sharing information and resources with groups around the world. "The Americans in Texas are working on something called a gravity disruptor," announced 12-year-old Timothy Clark, reading from his computer. "They need help with the mathematics." "Send them Professor Mitchell's equations," Emma replied. "He's been working on theoretical gravity manipulation for years." An older woman named Betty Price looked up from the communication device she was assembling. "In my day, children played with toys. Now they're coordinating international resistance movements. In your day, aliens hadn't shown up trying to steal children," Emma pointed out. The coordination was remarkable. Ideas flowed freely between continents. A farmer in Iowa shared a design for a magnetic field generator with engineers in Germany. A programmer in Japan created software that was used by inventors in Brazil. A mechanic in Australia solved a power problem that had been puzzling scientists in Canada and in Seattle. Jennifer Walsh had been coding for 72 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. Her virus program was unlike anything that had ever been written, designed specifically to confuse alien computer systems. It doesn't try to destroy their software, she explained to her online team of volunteer programmers. Instead, it makes everything work just a little bit wrong. Their navigation goes off by tiny amounts. Their weapons miss their targets by small margins. Their communication has tiny delays. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, commented Marcus Chun, a programmer from San Francisco. Exactly. They'll spend so much time fixing small problems that they won't have time to fight effectively. The alien monitoring systems detected the human communications but could not understand their significance. The humans seemed to be sharing information about everything from cooking recipes to scientific theories, all mixed together in a chaotic stream that made no logical sense. Perhaps they are experiencing psychological breakdown from stress, suggested. Vicstar. Possible, Zethkara agreed. Continue monitoring. Their surrender announcement should come soon. But instead of surrender, the human activity only intensified. In workshops and laboratories around the world, people worked with a focus and determination that surprised even themselves. Dr. Rachel Kim had opened her laboratory to volunteers, and her small research facility was now producing experimental chemicals around the clock. We're not trying to poison them, she explained to her international team via video call. We're trying to disrupt their biological systems just enough to cause confusion. What kind of confusion? Asked Dr. Singh from Mumbai. Imagine if your sense of balance was slightly off, or if colors looked different than they should, or if sounds seemed to come from the wrong direction, Rachel replied. Not enough to cause permanent damage, but enough to make fighting very difficult. The beauty of the human approach was its complete unpredictability. While the aliens expected massive military preparations, they got millions of small projects that individually seemed harmless, but together created something unprecedented. In Kansas, Bob Williams finished his device and powered it on for the first time. The machine hummed quietly, and his improvised sensors indicated it was working. What's it supposed to do again? Gary asked. Create localized gravity fluctuations, Bob replied, reading from the plans. Basically, it should make their ships feel like they're flying through thick soup. And you built this in your garage. With help from about 50 people online, yeah. Gary shook his head in amazement. The aliens probably have computers that could calculate everything about this device in seconds. Sure, Bob agreed. But they'd have to know it exists first. And by the time they figure out what this one does, there will be 10,000 other devices doing completely different things. The aliens had prepared for conventional warfare. They had studied human military doctrine, analyzed weapon capabilities, and calculated exactly how to defeat Earth's armed forces, but they had not prepared for a planet where every garage was a weapons lab. Every school was a coordination center, and every person was thinking of new ways to cause problems. As the seventh day approached, 6 billion humans continued working on projects that ranged from brilliant to insane. The aliens expected either surrender or a hopeless last stand by human military forces. What they were about to encounter was something entirely different: the collective creativity of a species that refused to be conquered. The seventh day arrived with clear skies over New York City. In orbit above Earth, Ambassador Zethkara's fleet had grown to over 50 massive ships, each one capable of destroying entire cities. The alien commander stood on his bridge, confident that the humans would finally understand the futility of resistance. Begin descent to the planet's surface, he ordered. Prepare to receive the human surrender. But as the alien ships moved closer to Earth, something unexpected began to happen. Small objects started launching from the planet's surface. Not in organized waves like military missiles, but in chaotic swarms that seemed to come from everywhere at once. What are those? Zethkara demanded, watching his sensors track thousands of tiny contacts. Unknown objects, sir, replied Vicstar, his voice showing the first signs of concern. They appear to be primitive constructions, but there are so many of them. The first wave consisted of 10,000 modified drones, each one built in a different garage, workshop, or basement around the world. Some carried cameras, others hauled welding equipment, and a few transported packages that would have confused alien engineers. In Kansas, Bob Williams watched his contribution to the swarm launch from a makeshift catapult in his backyard. There she goes, he said to Gary Thompson. One gravity disruptor headed for space. Think it'll work? Gary asked. Only one way to find out. The aliens opened fire with their advanced weapons, easily destroying the primitive human devices. But for every drone they destroyed, 10 more appeared. The humans were not trying to win a battle with superior technology. They were conducting the largest experiment in history. Sir, Vicstar reported, his voice now clearly worried, we're detecting massive energy buildups across the planet. Not from military installations, but from everywhere. Zethkara felt the first flutter of uncertainty. Specify everywhere, residential areas, industrial zones, agricultural regions. It's as if the entire planet has become a weapon. In Detroit, the factory where President Martinez had given her speech was now humming with activity. Workers operated machines that had been completely rebuilt in the past week, creating devices that had never existed before. Electromagnetic pulse generators are online, reported engineer Susan Torres. Gravity field manipulators ready, added mechanic Tom Bradley. Biological disruption system standing by, called Dr. Rachel Kim from her mobile laboratory. President. Martinez stood in the center of the chaos, watching status reports pour in from around the world. How many devices are active? She asked. Over 6 million and counting, ma'am, replied former NASA engineer Carol Davis. Every major population center has at least 100 different projects running. The alien fleet found itself surrounded by a cloud of human-made devices, none of which seemed to pose any threat individually. But as the small machines began activating, the aliens discovered that their supposedly invulnerable ships were experiencing problems. Sir, navigation is showing minor errors, reported a technician on Zethkara S. Bridge. Weapons targeting is slightly off calibration, added another. Artificial gravity is fluctuating by 0.01%, called a third. None of the problems seemed serious, but there were so many of them. Every system on every ship was experiencing tiny malfunctions that individually meant nothing but together created chaos. This is impossible, Zethkara growled. Their technology is primitive. How can they affect our systems? The answer came from 6 billion humans who had spent a week thinking about the problem. In Miami, Alex Rodriguez's drones released clouds of metallic dust that interfered with alien sensors. In Phoenix, Carol Davis's electromagnetic pulse generators created fields that disrupted alien electronics. In Seattle, Jennifer Walsh's virus infected alien computer systems through their own scanning equipment. Sir, Vicstar's voice was now openly panicked. Ship 7 reports complete navigation failure. Ship 12 has lost weapons control. Ship 23's artificial gravity has reversed itself. But the real surprise came when the aliens tried to adapt. Their logical, efficient systems began analyzing the human devices and calculating responses. But every time they solved one problem, 17 new ones appeared. In Chicago, Danny Murphy's massive crossbow launched a projectile that did no damage but released a chemical compound Dr. Rachel Kim had designed. The compound did not harm the aliens, but it made their sense of balance malfunction slightly. In London, Emma Johnson's coordination center activated a network of modified radio transmitters that created sound frequencies, just annoying enough to make alien crew members irritable. At Unfocused. In Kansas, Bob Williams's gravity disruptor finally reached its target, attaching itself to the hull of an alien ship and beginning to generate localized gravity fields that made the massive vessel feel like it was trying to fly through thick honey. They're not fighting us, Vicstar realized with growing horror. They're debugging us. The aliens had conquered 4,000 species using superior technology and logical tactics. But they had never encountered an enemy that treated their invasion fleet like a technical problem to be solved by 6 billion different approaches. "Sir, we're receiving a communication from the planet," reported the alien communications officer. "Put it through," Zethkara ordered. Hoping to finally hear humanity surrender, President Martinez appeared on the alien bridge's main screen, but she was not in a government building or military facility. She stood in a crowded warehouse surrounded by people working on dozens of different projects. "Ambassador Zethkara," she said calmly, "how are you enjoying your visit to Earth? Human, you will cease this chaos immediately and prepare." "Your tribute," the alien demanded, his voice showing strain for the first time. "I'm afraid that's not going to happen," President Martinez replied. "You see, you made a fundamental error in your calculations." On the alien bridge, another system failure alarm sounded. Zethkara's forearms gestured frantically as he tried to maintain his composure. "What error?" "Our technology is superior in every way." "Your technology is indeed impressive," the president agreed. "But you assumed we would fight you with technology. Instead, we fought you with something you don't understand." "Which is what?" "Human stubbornness multiplied by 6 billion. Around the alien fleet, the chaos continued to grow. Every ship was experiencing cascading system failures as human creativity overwhelmed alien engineering. Not through brute force, but through sheer unpredictability. "You came here expecting to fight armies," President Martinez continued. "Instead, you're fighting farmers who built gravity disruptors in their barns, teachers who created coordination networks in their classrooms, and teenagers who programmed viruses that make your computers hiccup." Zethkara looked around his bridge at the flashing warning lights and malfunctioning systems. "This is not how warfare is conducted." "Exactly," the president smiled. "This is how humans conduct warfare. We don't follow the rules because we don't know what the rules are supposed to be." "Sir," Vicstar interrupted urgently, "recommend immediate retreat. Our systems are failing faster than we can repair them." For the first time in his long career of conquest, Zethkara felt something he had never experienced before: defeat by a species that should have been easy to crush. "You cannot maintain this chaos forever," he said desperately. "Want to bet?" President Martinez replied, "We've got 6 billion people down here, and they're just getting started. Today they built gravity disruptors and computer viruses. Tomorrow they'll probably invent something even more annoying." She leaned closer to the camera. "Ambassador, I'm going to give you some free advice. Leave now, while your ships can still fly. Go back to your Galactic Council and tell them that Earth is off limits. The Council will send a larger fleet." "Then we'll get more creative," the president said simply. "You've seen what we can do with a week of preparation and basic materials. Imagine what we'll come up with if you give us a year and make us really angry." The alien fleet hung in space, their mighty ships reduced to chaos by an enemy that refused to fight fair. System failures cascaded through the fleet as millions of small human devices continued their work of creative destruction. "Sir," Vicstar pleaded, "we must withdraw immediately or risk complete fleet failure." Zethkara looked at the human president one last time. "The Council will remember this." "Good," President Martinez replied. "Make sure they remember what happens when someone threatens our children." The alien fleet began its retreat, their damaged ships limping away from Earth as fast as their failing systems could carry them. Behind them, 6 billion humans looked up at the stars with new confidence. They had learned something important about themselves. When faced with impossible odds, humans did not just fight back. They evolved, and the galaxy would never be the same.